This week on Eye on the Clarence.
My name's Ian Gaillard. I live in the Keerong Valley. I got interested in this whole situation when Arrow Shell PetroChina drilled an exploratory drill 3 kilometres upstream from my farm, where I breed horses with my wife, and we suddenly on a floodplain, and we suddenly started investigating this whole thing. We looked further into it, and for about 17 months with a number of people, we've been exploring this whole thing that is coal seam and unconventional gas in the Northern Rivers and elsewhere. So I'm the MC for tonight. You'll see a bit of me. And this is, it's a book called Eradicating Ecocide. It's a new term, but it's one, if we reflect a little, then we know that ecocide is something that is happening in our community, in our environment, in all levels, and governments aren't keeping up with it. And the promo says, exposing the corporate and political practices destroying the planet and proposing laws needed to eradicate ecocide. And we have a message from the author of this book in London for us. We're standing with you, as many others are around the world, on this great journey to end ecocides like the fracking taking place in Australia. We are one team, one people, standing for what's right for us and Earth. Together we have the courage, the vision and the spirit to make this a thing of the past and create a future. Love and hope from Polly Higgins and Eradicating Ecocide team in London. I would, without going much further, I would like to invite Drew Hutton, who is the president of LockTheGate in Australia, an organisation of over 100 groups who are banding together under that banner to make their voice known, our voice known, about the coal seam gas industry and unconventional gas and coal industries, and to educate and to take active steps to see what can be done about it with our regulators, who are often struggling to keep up with what has become a gas rush. And we find laws that are well behind the actual gas rush. The legislation to cover a lot of the things that's being brought out by this doesn't yet exist, and so this organisation is to organise and liaise, and as I said, it contains over 100 groups. So, Drew Hutton.
Thanks, Ian. Hello, everyone. One of the businesses we've got here tonight is actually to launch this book. It's a book called Dirty Fracking Business, and it's by my friend Peter Ralph, who's here tonight and is going to be speaking later. But Peter rang me one day, what was it, 18 months ago? About 18 months ago, and said he wanted to learn about coal seam gas in Queensland, and could I tell him about it. So at that stage I was driving right around Western Queensland and talking to farmers, landowners about coal seam gas and what their concerns were, and I was helping them with getting organised and getting the information about coal seam gas. And so I said, well, why don't you come with me on one of these trips? So Peter and I headed off out west, hours and hours of driving that we had over about 3 days. And he, on the first day, he said, look, I got to tell you something, Drew, because I was one of the founders of the Green Party in Australia. Don't hold that against me. And he said, look, he said, I don't usually like Greens, he said, and I'd never vote for him. I said, that's all right. 99% of the people we're going to go out and see wouldn't have exactly the same attitude, but I still get on okay with them. So he said, oh, okay, all right, well, we'll probably get on okay. Well, we did. We got on marvellously. We have ever since, and I'm really proud that he's got this book out. He's a great novelist. He's told a great story, and there is a great story to tell. And I am very privileged to be in a position where I'm part of that story, because it's not only a story about an enormous threat to rural Australia and many of the values that our country is based on, and much of the good work that's been done over the last half century, even longer, to protect the Australian landscape and our natural resources and our beautiful wild places. But it's also a story about people resisting that. Now, we've got many things to be proud of in our history, and I think when we look back on this time, we'll be proud of the way that people in rural Australia especially stood up and said, we're not prepared to allow the resource sector in this country, which is largely foreign owned, well over 80% foreign owned, to come in and trash our communities, to wreck our underground water systems, to ruin our food bowls, to put their infrastructure, their pipelines, their open cut coal mines, their coal seam gas wells, right across our best farmland. We're not prepared to do that. And even though people in the bush think of themselves as respectable people, you know, they're respectable, they're law-abiding, they take great pride in that. If there's a war, they're the first people to put their hands up their appropriate age to go off to war. And they don't really have a heritage of standing up to authority and fighting the government of the day. They usually don't do that. But when I went out to the bush 2 years ago and started talking to farmers, I met a mixture of resentment, rage, anger, depression, a whole range of reactions to what they were seeing coming at them. Because what was coming at them was the greatest threat to rural Australia, and probably the most radical transformation of rural Australia since the pastoral expansion of the 19th century. That's not too big a call. What we're looking at with this mining boom that's been going on now for about half a dozen years is just mind-boggling. And we've seen it, I'm a Queenslander, we've seen it probably at its most ruthless there, where we're looking at, we're already a massive coal producer and a coal exporter. That's going to triple. Our coal exports will triple. We have 4 companies which together are going to invest about $80 billion in coal seam gas projects. $80 billion. The Western Darling Downs, parts of the Eastern Darling Downs, into the Maranoa, around from Miles to Roma, if you know your geography of that area, up north into the Bowen Basin, even along the coastline as far as the Whitsundays. We're going to see the countryside, if you go up in a helicopter, look down on it, it'll look like a pincushion with coal seam gas wells. They're talking about 40,000 coal seam gas wells. Can I tell you it's more likely to be 80,000 coal seam gas wells across rural Queensland. They're looking now at shale gas to add to that. So put probably another 40,000 gas wells onto that. And you're talking about looking down on rural Queensland as a pincushion of gas wells. And between each of those gas wells, there's service roads and pipeline corridors, and then there's holding ponds for the water and reverse osmosis plants and processing plants. The landscape will change fundamentally. Fundamentally. And you add to that, on the Darling Downs, one of the great food bowls of our country, about another 20 open-cut coal mines, and some of them massive coal mines. And you're looking at an area that will never be the same again. We are looking at the most radical change to our landscape that we will ever see in our lifetimes. And add to that, landowners out there who are looking at never being able to sell their properties. They won't sell. Nobody has sold a property in 2 years with gas on it. Nobody. You can't, they've been trying. Plenty of people have had it on the market. And the agents just say to them, don't bother. You won't get a buyer. I've had plenty of people ring me up to tell me this, in tears, ringing me up to tell me this. Because for a lot of people, their farm is a superannuation. That's what they're getting old. They don't have children to look after the farm. They sell the farm. They go and live closer to health services and so on as they get older. Yeah, we're looking at a tragedy written hundreds of times over in rural Australia because of that. Now, I said there were two parts. This is just Queensland. I know it best. It's going to happen in New South Wales as well. We've got basically the same sort of story about to happen here, only you're about 2 or 3 years behind us in Queensland. That's an advantage for you, of course, because you can look up there and see what's happened and determine not to have this repeated. But I said at the start there were two sides to the story. The second side of the story is the resistance that's building. Now, when I went west a couple of years ago, the resistance was almost nil. There were a few people here and there that were telling the gas companies to bugger off, and they were under pressure, under enormous pressure. So the first thing that I said to them was, look, you mightn't like me, you mightn't like what I stand for. I'm an environmentalist. I'm well known in Queensland as an environmentalist, and I get the blame for the tree clearing laws and all the rest of it that the cockies don't like. But I say, what we need to do is you've got to link up with groups who know how to fight, because you are facing the biggest threat you'll ever face. You can't do it on your own. You'll have to link up with everybody else in your community, and you'll have to link up with other groups that are similarly affected, and you're going to have to link up with people from the city, especially the environment movement. And I put myself forward at that stage as the conduit to the environment movement for the farmers. And we did it. We formed an alliance. Nobody thought we could do it. Nobody thought we could do it. It completely blindsided them. One of the top advisors in the Labor Party, who I know, the Labor government at the time, who I knew vaguely, came to me one day and said, he said, what's really freaked them out in George Street, Drew, is you got together with the guys in the big hats. And that's exactly what happened. The farmers and environmentalists got together, developed a movement, and really it was an incredibly good synchronicity. Because they're on the land, we were the people who had worked out how to fight at the local community level. But things had gone on a bit too quickly. By September of 2010, the government had given approvals to 3 out of the 4 big coal seam gas projects. So I called all the landowner groups together in my little office at a place called Warra on the Darling Downs, and we decided to have a campaign of non-cooperation, Gandhian-style non-cooperation, where landowners just simply refused to negotiate access to the companies, especially coal seam gas. And I suggested we call it Shut the Gate. And Lee McNichol, a grazier from Jalaka, piped up and said, well, hang on, everyone in the country shuts the gate, you just open it again. We're going to lock the gate. So it became the Lock the Gate campaign. And that became, very soon afterwards, down in the Hunter Valley, people down there were talking about a national movement. Pull the whole resistance to this incredible threat together on a national basis, and so that we'd be much stronger. It was a nameless organisation, and they put me on the board I didn't go to the meeting, but you've got to be careful. You've got to go to meetings to make sure you don't get put on committees. Well, I didn't go to this one and got put on the committee. And the next thing I knew, I was the president. Anyway, it wasn't even my suggestion. A guy called John Thompson suggested it, that we call it the LockTheGate Alliance. And that's what it's become. And within about a year, that's all we've been going, a little over a year, the LockTheGate Alliance has become one of the most influential and best known NGOs in the country. And it's done that because we've been able to pull together that synchronicity. That it's not just a landowner movement. It's not just an environmental movement. It's not a NIMBY movement. If it's a NIMBY movement, there's 150 backyards that are being fought for at this time. That stops it being a NIMBY movement. It's become a movement that is about the future of Australia. That really is what it comes down to. Do we love this country? Do we love it? Do we love the landscape? Is that what we identify with? Do we identify with its wild places and its food bowl areas and its wide open spaces? Do they mean something to us, or is it just a source of a quick buck? Now, these companies are coming in for a quick buck. They don't care. They thought that they were going to get a free ride from governments, and they did. They thought they were going to walk in and do whatever they bloody well liked. And the people who stopped them were the people in the bush, who just simply said, we're locking our gates, and you're not coming on. And it's that courage. Ordinary people have become heroes over the last couple of years in rural parts of this country, and they've stopped, well, at least they've slowed down an environmental disaster. Now, we're going to get coal seam gas. I've got bad news here. We're going to get coal seam gas. But we're not going to get it to the extent that has been planned. And it's not going to go into all the areas that they think it was going to go into either. We're going to slow down their progress. They've come in and they've signed contracts with everybody going, especially the Chinese. Billions of dollars worth of contracts of gas. We are going to blow their business plans. We're going to slow them up. We're going to wreck their profit margins. We're going to bury them in regulation. They're going to not know what hit them. And they are going to have to justify to the Australian people what they are doing, how they're going to do it, and what is going to be the benefit for this country. They are going to have to be an industry that's in the national interest, not in the interest of foreign shareholders, not in the interest of the big end of town, but in the interest of this country. And if they can't show that they have an industry which is in the national interest, if they can't show that ordinary Australians are going to benefit from this boom and that we are not going to wreck the countryside and spoil the future for our children and our grandchildren, then they're not going to go ahead. We're going to stop them. We're going to lock the gate. Thanks, everyone.
I was at a hall meeting at the Keirong Hall on Wednesday night. We door knocked everybody in the Keirong Valley on 2 roads, and we unanimously, and there are some people that didn't show up at the meeting. There's about 4 households who are still considering what they will do, but to lock our valley to coal seam gas. And we will be putting signs up there, printing those signs with a big screen print, and putting those signs up at each end of the valley saying, this valley is closed to coal seam gas, protected by community. And at the end of the day, if you're in trouble, who's going to look after you? Your neighbours? Are your neighbours going to look after you, or is a mining company going to look after you? I just want to have a quick, excuse me, Janet, but I'm just going to ask Drew to come up to just say a brief thing there, which arose in Sue's talk. Relock the gate.
Sue's absolutely right on 2 things. The law says you should let these people in to trash your property. The law says that. But she's right about the other thing. Pell 470, south of Maria, Balata Gurley. I went out to speak to the landowners out there about 8 months ago now. There are about 100 of them in this big shed. Every one of them, at the end of the meeting, after I'd spoken, put up their hand. I explained to them that they were going to, this was a civil disobedience campaign in New South Wales. It's not in Queensland, actually, where it's not illegal to lock the gate, but in New South Wales it is. Explained to them it was civil disobedience, but that the alternative was that they let this company in, and once they were in, you couldn't get them out. 100% response, they locked the gate. They raided my car, took every lock the gate sign from my car and stuck it up at their front gate. They've never had one company representative able to persuade one person in that whole community to unlock their gate. And there has never been a person in New South Wales, a landowner in New South Wales or in Queensland, has been taken to the land court by one of these companies. Not one. They are not game. They're simply not game to do it. Once you've locked your gate, they then have to take you to arbitration. In Queensland, they have to take you to compulsory mediation, which is much the same thing, and then they can take you to the land court. It's a process that goes, I think it's 28 days in New South Wales, 40 days in Queensland. Arrives at the same thing, they can take it to the land court. Not one person gone to the land court yet. And in fact, 3 out of the 4 companies in Queensland have said there's no way we will ever take anyone to land court. Because they know, as well as I do, that the land court just simply might, as happened, by the way, in the Hunter Valley when a coal miner took a landowner to court, they might find that they get a judgment against them. That's what happened there. The judge took it as far as he possibly could in favour of the landowner. So much so that the company decided they'd better get off that fella's land because it wasn't going to do them any good at all to try and stay there. But the other thing is if they take you to the land court, they take any farmer to the land court, they then have to go and get the police, and the police have to come in and they have to march over the top of that farmer and his wife and his kids and go onto that property to allow probably a foreign multinational mining company onto that property to trash it. And at that point, every Australian who's worth his salt will rise up in rebellion. They will not tolerate it. And that's why I'm saying the two most important things, you are not complying with the law when you lock your gate in New South Wales. But I'm encouraging you to do it. There is a solid tradition in Western democracies, all democracies, a Gandhian tradition which says if there's an evil law, if there's a law that is oppressive and unjust, then you have a right in a democratic society to break it as long as you're prepared to accept the consequences of that. I've broken that law in Queensland. I'm prepared to accept the consequences of that. Every landowner can break that law, I believe, with complete impunity, and it is the best thing to do. And the other thing that you've got to do is get as much solidarity in your community as you can, because the more solidarity you've got, the more you can keep them out.
Come on up.
Look, I'll be very quick. I think I've said everything I need to say tonight, but I just wanted to point out that this is a big social movement that we're developing here, Lock the Gate. It's going to be extremely significant. There's going to be tens of thousands of Australians will join this movement. Thousands already are. And one of the things that happens in a social movement is that it gives rise to all sorts of new cultural forms. You all of a sudden start getting artists who get caught up in the tenor of the times and songwriters who get caught up in it. There are so many songs about fracking now that I've lost count of them. And we get novelists like Peter who take up the themes. So what started off as just simply a lobbying exercise against government, pretty boring stuff, has turned into an incredibly resilient and exciting movement of people who are trying to save their country. So I think that's really significant. It's significant that we had Peter here tonight to tell us about his book, and I really encourage you to read it. It's a great read, despite the fact that the fellow called Derek Fuller comes to a very sticky end. I think he goes to jail for a zillion years, doesn't he? Just for a couple, right. Yeah, so I really encourage you to join local groups. You're going to have Shanine in a minute tell you how to do that. I really encourage you to do it. I really encourage you to talk to your neighbours about it. The more solidarity you can get from the community, the better. Join LockTheGate. It's really important that you are part of this whole national movement that's going on. We can only win if we're united. We cannot win if there's this little group over here and that little group over here, and they never talk to each other. So come together, join the whole movement, be a dynamic part. Thank you.
I'd like you to give a big round of applause for Shauneen Cooper. She's organised this, and she and Janet have been the driving forces behind, and Sister Katie over there, behind getting this known in this area. So let's put our hands together for Shauneen.
Thank you very much. Must admit I'm a little bit nervous standing up here in front of everyone. Just like to give an acknowledgement to the Clarence Environment Centre. Actually kicked this off over, I think it was probably 18 months ago. They did an information night at Coaldale. They got plenty of people there. They also did an information night at the South Grafton Club here. But as it's starting to heat up, it's great that we've actually got a few more people that are coming in, and we've actually formed an alliance against this in the Clarence Valley. And this alliance is made up of the local Aboriginal Land Council, the Clarence Environment Centre, you've got the Clarence Coalition, Conservation Coalition, sorry, the Climate Change Panel, which Janet represents. We've got the CWA, the Country Women's Association, we've got the Farmers Association, we've got the Fisheries, and a whole heap of other organisations that have all come together in a united front against this, because we realise that the impacts of this outweigh the small opportunities for a couple of people that may get some jobs out of it for a short term. So we've called this the Clarence Alliance Against CSG, and if you want to join or get active, please, there's an email here, clarenceagainstcsg@yahoo.com.au. Also grab an info flyer. I think everyone's got one on their chairs. Also, we encourage people, if you don't want to get active and join our group, you can write letters to, Barry O'Farrell, you can write letters to Chris Galactus, the MP, you can call him up, badger him, and say, we don't want this here. Now, I must say a lot of thank yous to many people out here, because we've had local musicians come in. Brad Wheat hasn't played yet, but he will soon, that have just given up their time to volunteer to come here, and also Jeff Wellham on the harp player. Well done, Jeff. We've also got many people that have put a lot of time and effort into this, particularly Janet Kavanagh, Diane, John Edwards. We've got Lisa Jade Hunter, who's done a fabulous job just selling brownies and selling them for our fundraising. None of this could be paid for without this money. And our main aim is to actually get out here and educate the Clarence Valley. Now, it's not up to us to say, don't do it. We're here to say, please be informed, have an informed decision on this, And then at least we know that you know everything about it, you know both sides of it, and you can go from there. But hopefully, you know, given all the negatives that this industry has the effects of on our local Clarence Valley, we're hoping that you do lock the gate. And I'd like to thank all these people that came from all over Australia. We had Peter Ralph that just spoke. He's the author from Melbourne, came all the way up from Melbourne to speak to the Clarence Valley. We had Brian Monk, I'm not sure what town, sorry, Queensland. Kogan. Yeah. Brian Monk has lived and breathed this, and his poor grandchildren got burnt in the bathtub with the chemicals. And thank you, Ian Gaillard from Keerong Gas Squad, and Judy coming down, and everyone to help out with the night. We've got Sue Higginson from Lismore, Boudica Cerise, environmental scientist. I wish you were up here tonight talking as well. Drew Hutton, I mean, amazing. It's just amazing that we got these people here tonight, and we thank you so much for coming all the way from wherever you came from to help us out to educate the Clarence Valley. Thank you.
I can't sleep tonight. I'm fearing for the future of our precious southern land. How can they justify poisoning our rivers for the good of common man? They say it's clean, they tell their lies, but all the while our country dies. Stand up, Australia, stand up for this land. Stand up, Australia, the future's in our hands, 'cause it's our Mother Earth and we can't let them take it all away. Stand up, Australia, and fight for what we have today. How can they sleep at night, knowing what the risks are? It's not just what is happening to our land. There's people getting sick, it's poisoning our children and feeding all the greediness of man. They say it's clean, they tell their lies, but all the while our country dies. Stand up, Australia, stand up for this land. Stand up, Australia, the future's in our hands, 'cause it's our Mother Earth and we can't let them take it all away. Stand up, Australia, and fight for what we have today. No coal seam gas, no coal seam gas today. No coal seam gas, Australia says no way. No coal seam gas, no coal seam gas today. No coal seam gas, Australia shut the gate. Stand up, Australia. Stand up for this land. Stand up, Australia. The future's in our hands, 'cause it's our Mother Earth and we can't let them take it all away. Stand up, Australia, and fight for what we have today, yeah. For what we have today. For what we have today, yeah, 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 yeah. For what we have today.